Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. You may have heard about the federal government's NEVI program. That stands for National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, and it was funded in the 2021 Bipartisan Infrastructure Law at $1 billion a year for 5 years. Michigan was fortunate to receive $110 million of that money. So I had a conversation with Steve Minton, who is managing the NEVI program for MDOT. I hope you enjoy and find it as interesting as I did. So again, I'm with Steve Minton, who is a project manager in MDOT's Innovative Contracting Unit, and he's overseeing MDOT's portion of implementation of the NEVI program, as I mentioned earlier. Steve, thank you very much for taking time to talk about this fascinating and somewhat complex topic.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here and help provide some clarity and information around the NEVI program.
Well, let's start first with your background. What did you do prior to managing this high-profile project, and how did you make your way through the MDOT ranks?
Sure, yeah. So I've only been in innovative contracting for a little less than a year now, and jumped into NEVI, right, basically almost day one. So Ryan Mitchell, who was the innovative contracting unit manager at that time, said, "Hey, Steve, I got the perfect project for you." Didn't really know what I was getting into, but it's been a really interesting and fun project. But before that, I worked for MDOT in Metro Region for 25 years, actually more than 25 years, and did a variety of things. But my last role there was as the region system manager, managing the program and the funding for the 5-year program, and a lot of other things. Previous to that, I worked at the TSC level, Projects and Contracts Administration, had managed projects for a long time as a PM. I spent some time in construction as a construction engineer as well during those times at the TSC level. Covered a lot of things. I worked at Oakland TSC, I worked at Macomb TSC, I worked at Port Huron TSC in different roles. Almost all of it on the project side. Yeah, it was all on the project side primarily, and did work a little bit in the region before all that in the geotechnical group. So doing soil checks and those sorts of things for that group. So pretty wide experience on the project side, covering from planning, design, development, and then working at the program level, and then getting into ICU, kind of getting back to my project roots, which has been really fun, and getting back to that kind of satisfaction you get from kind of working on a project and seeing things get accomplished.
Yeah, that's really broad-based. You were clearly doing a lot on the ground. So did a younger Steve Minton envision himself managing a project to help power vehicles that don't use gasoline or diesel fuel?
That's a really good question. I can say no, nope, and even like an older Steve Minton probably wouldn't have said that either. So it's been a really interesting kind of project to work on, just because it is so different than anything else we kind of do at MDOT, and just from the nature of the project itself to how we're contracting and working through those processes, which are very different. So yeah, it's been exciting to really kind of take this on and try to to see it through and get these chargers installed. And really that'll be the I guess the definition of success is when we get these things up and running.
Well, President Biden and his administration have put a huge priority on this, both for environmental reasons and because, some of our nation's largest industries, especially in Michigan, have gone all in on this. And we know there's been fits and starts, and some of it is because of the charging infrastructure. Some of it is other projections just haven't panned out the way people thought. People have all kinds of concerns, but we still need to be there, I guess, when the train pulls up. So let's talk about the process, beginning with administering the grants and sorting through the submissions of inquiries, and then the RFPs, and then procurement. And, given the uncharted territory, has it been difficult to maintain a schedule? Can you talk about those things?
Yeah, kind of starting with your first thought there. So, yeah, I know, the automakers have maybe adjusted their kind of outlook in terms of the demand for EV. But the truth is, EV ownership is still going up each year, even though that might be a little less than what some of the automakers thought initially. But all the kind of information and data still shows that more and more people are buying EVs. So it is really critical that there's a program to get these chargers installed, so it reduces that range anxiety that people have, and that's what NEVI is going to accomplish, is to get these chargers spread throughout the state, such that you can go on any of our what we call alternate fuel corridors and feel confident that you'll be able to charge your vehicle if you need that anywhere around the state for the most part. So it is a different program. So it did come out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. They allocated $7.5 billion for this I guess installing this EV infrastructure to help get more confidence in this for folks to buy an EV and want to own them. And so $5 billion of that $7.5 billion is for what we call the NEVI formula program, in which each state gets a certain allocation of it. In this case, Michigan's getting $110 million. And the other portion of that $7.5 billion is the $2.5 billion is for a competitive grant program that is community based. And I think it's for charging and fuel infrastructure. I'm probably messing up the acronym, but
I think is alternative fuel part of that?
Yeah, possibly. So essentially, cities have to submit applications and how they would use the funding to install alternate fuel infrastructure, really. So, and I know some of the initial grants, Lansing was one that received one from that program, and other states got a lot of money too. And I know Texas received one for a hydrogen corridor. So it is not just EV focused in that case. But talking about the EV or the NEVI portion of the program, the formula portion where I'm, working in that 110 million. So we've initially kind of allocated that 110 million over, the 5 years of the authorization. And with round one, we're working on that right now, and it's been a real learning curve because this process is to basically, select and then get under contract companies that aren't traditional, let's say, infrastructure companies in the way we think of infrastructure as like roads and bridges. And so, us getting used to, or not used to, but understanding, kind of how they operate, and then them to understand what our processes are. Certainly, we're trying to find that common understanding. So things such as having a request for qualifications, which we did, them submitting, what they thought would meet the requirements for that, having some kind of back and forth, and then getting to what we call the request for proposal. We received 93 proposals from 22 different, project companies. And, there was still even a little bit of learning at that point that they didn't maybe submit everything exactly as we intended, and had to follow up and say, okay, you're still missing this or still missing that. And then to go through the selection process. So our scoring, so this was a best value selection, meaning we are looking both at, their technical requirements as well as their price. So it's a combination of two on a 100-point scale. So we really were evaluating, what really came down to is the primary driver of getting points in terms of that scoring process. Where is their proposed site? What are the amenities that are nearby? Proposers that proposed at locations like a 24-hour gas station would, score higher than somebody who had it maybe at a convenience store that was only open, let's say 9 hours a day or 10 hours a day or something. But so most of the locations, that we selected with initial round one are primarily at gas stations. Some are at major grocery stores like a Meijer. Some are at smaller convenience stores. Some are at restaurants. So it's really what's nearby that charging station, because it takes 20, 30 minutes to charge up on a DC fast charger. And so what can you do in those 20 minutes? Is there food nearby? Is there a park nearby? Are there other amenities nearby? Those are ones that really scored well and the ones that we end up selecting. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're at the selection stage. We announced those a couple of weeks ago. And now we go into the contracting stage, which is again another learning curve for these companies. They're not used to how we bond and how we have insurance requirements and those sorts of things. So there will be some hand holding to get us through that process.
Well, going to your point about the time it takes to charge and having something to do, I think that's why Meyer Corporation was really out front on that a few years back, partnering with Tesla on providing charging infrastructure, because they knew that, if you're in a Meyer parking lot and you got some time to kill, what are you going to do but go in the store, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, that was really forward thinking. Can you talk a little bit about the MDOT's got a lot of expertise in innovative contracting and been, very flexible about trying new things to be more efficient given the decades long, shortage of funding. And it's really made a lot of people smart about different ways to do things. Has that really benefited, you think, that kind of culture of innovation in administering this?
Yeah, another great question. So the NEVI formula program, so there's something called the NEVI final rule that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law that essentially said, hey, with this funding, not only will we partially or mostly pay for these charging stations, but the charging stations have to operate at a 97% uptime for 5 years after they come online. And so how do you contractually ensure that happens? And so thankfully, we already have contracting types that work for that, and it's called design, build, operate, maintain, or DBOM, as we like to refer to it. So it essentially, it's a contracting method where the entity that we're contracting with has to do the design. In this case, it's pretty simple. A site plan for a charging station is really not that complicated, and then they have to construct it. That's the build portion, and then the operate and maintain is for that 5-year period, and we have milestone payments that they will receive each year if they are operating and maintain it per the contractual requirements, and there are penalties if they are less than that 97% uptime. So really critical point here is that of the existing stations that are out there kind of around the country today, I think I've seen the number at any given time, like 20% of them aren't operational. And that's a real concern that, if you're driving along and have an EV and want to charge, how do you know that if there is a charger, in your vicinity, that it's actually operational? So it's a really a critical focal point for the program that these chargers, when they're installed and operational, that they are up and running all the time. And so that's really critical to this program. But again, kind of back to the contracting method, thankfully, we have a method that works well, and then we're, familiar with it and used to it. And so we can tailor our contract documents to fit the NEVI program, which we did.
Stick around, there's more to come right after this short message.
Know before you go. Head on over to MyDrive to check out the latest on road construction and possible delays along your route. For a detailed map, head over to michigan.gov/drive.
Well, I know this isn't in your silo as much, but what you talked about is so important that we've got to know that the infrastructure is reliable. And that's why there's another track going that involves repairing and making sure that the chargers are working, right? Yeah.
So there's another grant that Michigan received, the Charger Reliability Accelerator and something else. It's CRAA. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for. Essentially, what it does is it gives this MDOT 1.8 million, I believe, is what was received, to work with, let's say, the owners of the existing stations that aren't operational, and to work with them, to have them, to provide funding to get them operational again. So I'm, I'll say fortunately, not fortunately, but handling that part of, let's say, this space. So there was others. I know Tim Crowes in our operations bureau is working on that program. So it's connected, but a little different than what NEVI's doing.
Yeah. So what do you hear from maybe not just colleagues, but friends or family when they ask you, "Hey, what are you doing these days?" How do you how do you talk about it and, break it down, especially for, any EV skeptics you might know?
Yeah, right. So it's I think more people are becoming familiar, and I think as we do things like this, just to kind of get the word out, and it's just, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, like even at the charging level. Like, okay, a level 2 charger is not the same as a DC fast charger. They're very different. And a level 2 charger can be installed in your garage. And it's like it takes let's say, the same type of power connection as you would hook up an electric dryer. So like a 240 volt. You can have, that installed in your garage if you have, kind of the right, capability for not a lot. I mean, I think it's about $1,000 to get that, and you can charge at home. And that's actually the most economical way to do it. Now, if you're out and about and, you weren't able to charge at home for some reason or running low, we're trying to fill that gap with these DC fast chargers, which, will charge very fast, 20 minutes, if you're, close to empty on a normal or let's say average EV vehicle. And so, the idea is, hey, if you're out and about, there should be something available for you to charge quickly and not cause a great deal of inconvenience.
Maybe I'm thinking too much about Seinfeld episodes, but I kind of envision situations with HOAs and various condo associations where some people, may be really into EVs and want the association to provide charging infrastructure, and others being like, no way are we supporting that. I'm never driving an EV, and why would I do that? I know this is outside of your policy expertise, but do you think that those kinds of debates are going to continue for a while?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was just at an event yesterday down at SEMCOG, the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, just to kind of talk about let's say at a local government level, what are they doing and how do we coordinate with them at a state level? But some of the conversations even dive deeper into like, a multi, family dwelling, how do you set up chargers for a situation like that? And is that possible? And so you start thinking about those sorts of things and just, getting that availability of, whether it's a DC fast charger or level 2 charger, or even a level 1 charger, what options are there? And, it's not quite the same as going to a gas station and filling up, even though these will exist at gas stations. And so I think that's just a natural, let's say solution to where these things can be. But they also can be at your home, and they also can be, at restaurants and convenience stores, or maybe an apartment complex. So, yeah, I think we're just at the beginning of all this. And then the more minds that are looking into it and thinking about it and trying to come up with those solutions, I think the better. And I think we'll see all kinds of things that'll probably come to fruition here.
We still get a lot of questions sometimes from lawmakers when they come to Lansing for the first time, and obviously on social media from the general public. The Federal Highway Administration has long not allowed for these kinds of concessions and rest areas on federal aid roads. Have you been involved in any discussions about that changing and whether or not DOTs could provide it at rest areas or rideshare lots?
Yeah, I don't know a lot. I do know there's some issue with being able to generate revenue or something at a rest area. So it's not like we could partner with a private entity to have something installed where they would be able to actually make money at a rest area. So I'm not part of those conversations directly. I've kind of been on the periphery of them. So I don't unfortunately know a lot, but it seems like just intuitively that there would be some solution to allow us to do something like that. But I don't know when or how that will happen.
Yeah, I think it confuses people even more when they see the plazas on toll roads in Ohio or Indiana or Pennsylvania, and we don't have a turnpike or toll roads, and
exactly.
They're operated under their own authorities, and they have a lot more leeway. It's a lot of explaining.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, because right. I mean, it just seems like an intuitive thing. Like, why can't we? So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have quite those same setups. So a little bit more effort maybe to try to figure that out.
Thank you, Steve, for breaking this down. I'm really looking forward to watching this as it goes forward, and being part of something bigger that is going to it's going to be part of a revolutionary change in how we drive, and it's going to be ultimately it's going to be a good thing for our carbon footprint, for the environment, and mean a lot to our future generations. So is there anything else you want to add to what we talked about?
No, those are some really great questions that I think will be helpful for people to understand kind of the program and where we're headed with all this. And it is the future. So, it'll probably be a little slower transition than maybe some were originally thinking, but it's coming. And I think will be a great benefit, to our environment and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, these things are never a straight line. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. As much as we want them to be.
Nope. Well, thank you, Steve.
All right. Well, thank you.
I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, Courtney Bates, who posts the podcast to various platforms, and Jackie Salinas, who transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.